It seems no matter where you go or who you ask, there is always a story of something odd and unexplainable to be told. Whether it be bumps in the night, unknown creatures stalking your home, or something more sinister, these subscribers sent in their allegedly true, creepy experiences with things they just cannot explain. If you would like to share a story that you just can't explain on a future video, be sure to send it in to swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. Joining me today is my good friend Mr. X Dreams. He narrates creepy stories ranging from cryptids to paranormal and more. I'd highly recommend you subscribe and check out his videos if you enjoy his voice. Now, let's get into these tales of terror. It was 2001. I was 5 years old, but I still remember everything clearly. It was August when me, my 3-year-old brother, and my parents traveled to Algarve, a well-known Portuguese location. We arrived at a farm so massive, I couldn't see the end. There were 3 cabins placed along each side of each other. We stayed in one of them throughout this holiday week. The first day was uneventful, and so I'll fast forward to the morning after that. The weather was amazing, so we decided to head to the nearby beach. Traveling by train to get there, we went to the beach in the morning, and by afternoon, we went for a walk after lunch. By the end of the day, we returned to the cabin, and I was amazed to see that there was another family there, with kids. I was grateful I had someone to play with, since my brother was still too young, and wasn't allowed outside the cabin very much. That evening I went to talk to the kids from the other family. I was shy at first, but they were kind and very responsive. We immediately hit it off and started playing. I still remember them pretty well, and they were 2 sisters, the younger one around my age and the older one must have been around 8 or 9 years old. The sisters had dark long hair and were thin like their parents. The mother had a short haircut, and the father was baldish. We played that day, throwing rocks at one another. I don't really remember them throwing, but I know I threw. And I, as a kid who loved and still loves spiders and critters, showed them the spiders around the area. Soon after this, my parents called for me to go into dinner. The next day was the same, beach by morning, walk by the afternoon, and playing with the girls in the evening. I loved it. I remember somewhere on my 3rd day my parents brought this cereal from the supermarket which contained Jurassic Park cards. It was the year the Jurassic Park movie came out, and I loved it and still do. I was anxious to show the girls the card I had with a 3D-ish representation of a pack of raptors. I went outside in the evening to show them the card. I remember they got scared easily, and I also remember I tried so many times to convince them to play dinosaurs with me, but they just preferred to go spider seeking, which is still fine by me. The final day, I didn't say goodbye to the girls. They were nowhere to be seen, and this made me sad. I spoke nothing of it afterward until 2015. I was waiting for my girlfriend at the time to arrive for us to go out, when out of nowhere, I started having memories about that place. I asked my mother the name of the place, but she said it had no name. We were there testing to see if it was comfortable and all that because we knew this one person in charge of the farm. I was okay with this, but then I asked who the other people were that we played with. And this is the most chilling reply. Who? I asked again, but my mother didn't seem to know whom I was referring to. I started giving her the description of the other family that was there with us, and she insisted that there was no other family. This made sense since it was not open to the public. I froze in panic. I remember them so vividly, the girls above all. My mother got kind of spooked at this point and asked my father just to be certain, to which my father firmly replied that there was no one there with us. I immediately asked my brother and he remembered the girls also. Not so clearly since he wasn't out of the cabin often, but he always knew there were people there with us and he described exactly who I saw. We both were shocked to know that there was nobody there at all. Confused, I searched that same day and found out it was now named Quinta dos Perfumes, or Perfumes Farm. It's a well-known place for actors as well as famous people to pass their holidays, since it has gained an almost 5-star rating. To this day, I don't know who those people were, or if they were ever real, or if they were some sort of ghost or something. If anybody could help me explain that, it'd be very appreciated.
My name is Corey. I'm currently 30 years old and have lived all over the United States throughout my life. I've always been quite skeptical when it comes to ghosts, but there were some strange things that happened in a new home my family moved into in Michigan back in 2005. These events made me a little more open-minded. A little background on the house. The previous owners were an older man and his wife. One of them died inside the house while the other died outside, shoveling snow out of the driveway. At the time when we moved in, my siblings and I were all in school, with the youngest of us just starting elementary. My father worked full-time during the day, while my mother took care of things around the house. My mother claims that one day while she was alone, she heard someone whisper something into her ear. It was a word she wasn't familiar with, but it startled her. The voice said, Enoch, which my mother later discovered after some research is actually a name from the Bible. Thinking she had just imagined it, she started cleaning around the house. During her cleaning, she noticed a small card lying on the floor in the main hallway. Upon further inspection, she discovered that it was the Social Security card of the man that had last lived in the house. This was months after we had moved in, and there was no way it could have been placed there by anyone. This was just the beginning of some of the strange things that happened in the house. My bedroom was in the basement, which I loved. There was plenty of room for my drum set and musical equipment. My dog would never come downstairs unless I carried her down, and as soon as I did, she would leave immediately. I thought this was kind of odd because she would go anywhere else in the house without a problem. I have a lot of strange stories about living in that basement. Once I was sitting in my bedroom down there, home alone, when I heard footsteps upstairs. I thought maybe my parents or one of my siblings had come home. I called out to see who it was, but I got no answer. I headed upstairs and saw no vehicles in the driveway. I checked around the ground floor to make sure nobody was home. Realizing that no one was, I headed back downstairs and started playing on my drum set. I'd been playing for about 10 minutes when I thought I heard someone shout my name from upstairs. I stopped playing, muted my cymbals, and shouted out once again. I expected it was my parents announcing that they were home so I wouldn't bother them with my playing, but again, no reply came from upstairs. This time, I checked through a basement window, which had a view of the driveway. Still, no vehicles. This kind of creeped me out, but I was still highly skeptical. I chalked it up to my ears ringing from the drums and continued playing. Once my parents returned, I told them what had happened. This is when my mother told me the story about the Social Security card, which she had kept secret from my siblings and me. Over the next few weeks, things got even stranger. One night I was lying in bed about to doze off when a noise jolted me out of my relaxed state. A tapping that seemed to come from the wall right above my head. I thought it might be a rodent or something inside the wall and was about to search around when the tapping suddenly stopped. Eventually I was able to drift off to sleep, but the tapping soon returned. It was relentless. This went on 2 or 3 more times until I requested out loud, "Hey, can you please stop? I'm trying to get some rest for school tomorrow." The tapping ceased and never returned. The strangest things that happened in the house were witnessed by some friends and I. My parents were out of town, so naturally I planned a party. We left the house to get some party supplies, and I made sure to shut off every light in the house. I was raised this way, and have always been really good about it. I shut the door to the basement as well, double-checking it was shut tight. We went out on our adventure for supplies, and when we returned, we came in through the back door. As soon as I opened the door, I saw that the basement light was on, and the door was slightly ajar. My friends thought it was really strange, but I said that it just might be a draft from me opening the door. Out of curiosity, I shut the door, but not entirely. I reenacted my arrival once again by opening the back door to see if the door would open again. It wouldn't. I also knew that I had shut the door firmly and had turned every light inside the house off before I left. This definitely gave my friends the creeps, and to be honest, it kind of freaked me out a bit too. I didn't tell anyone that night about the tapping story except my mother, mostly because I didn't want to scare anyone. Luckily, this is as crazy as the story gets. I eventually moved out of the house to work on the other side of the country for the summer. When I came back to Michigan, my parents had moved to a new house. My siblings all have stories of their own concerning the house, but I really don't want to bring it up to them again. I wouldn't say I'm a complete believer in the paranormal now, but I am certainly less skeptical after living in that house. Big thanks and shout out to Swamp Dweller for inviting me over to his channel. I'm Mr. X Dreams. Good night, my friends.
My name is John, and this is the second seriously strange experience that I had with the paranormal, supernatural, or whatever you may want to call it. This experience happened back in 1985 or 1986 when I was 17 or 18 years old. I was with a religious group and we were on a religious retreat weekend in Ohio. While we were on the trip back to Massachusetts, we stopped over at a religious retreat center just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to rest, relax, and enjoy ourselves. To give a bit of backstory here, at the time I was a very quiet, reserved, and shy type of person. I wasn't, however, antisocial in the least. I was learning how to develop a more serious, deep, and meaningful relationship with myself, others, and my creator. I was feeling good about myself, confident, yet not arrogant, strong, yet not violent. I was feeling the most positive and happiest I had ever felt in my whole life, because I was beginning to feel like I belonged somewhere in a part of a community where all others accepted me. It felt like they wanted me to be there just as much as I wanted to be there. I was hanging out with a bunch of people in the rec room talking, playing pool, and having a great time. It was about 12:30 or 1 in the morning when I decided to call it a night, heading to my room. When I got there, my roommates were already asleep, so I quietly got my stuff, went to the bathroom, and got ready for bed. I had this funny feeling that something was wrong. I just couldn't quite put my finger on it. Call it a sixth sense or whatever, but it just felt evil, or wrong somehow. I went to my bed, sat down on the side of the bed, and looked out the window. That's when I saw it. This freaky looking tree right outside the window. I got the most overwhelming sense of evil coming from the tree. I've heard of objects being haunted and possessed. I've also heard of sometimes a spirit would reside in something until one day it would show itself to someone. I just never expected it to be me. I got the most intense sense of a pure evil coming from this tree. I can only explain it as the tree seemed to be a conduit for some kind of malevolent spirit, and it wanted to do harm. In my mind, I could see the most horrific looking face in the tree. It was something that would make Stephen King and Wes Craven soil themselves. That's what I felt coming from this thing. It had this inhuman laugh, and I got this feeling that it was telling me that it wanted me. Here I was in disbelief about the whole situation. I closed my eyes and told it that I couldn't have me before I started to pray to God for help. After about 10 minutes of praying, I felt this calm come over me, and I opened my eyes to see nothing more than the tree outside my window. The entity was gone and I could no longer feel the presence or the fear that it made me feel. The next thing I knew, the sun was just coming up, and this was to my relief. I knew I had made it through this encounter with evil, and I'm grateful to be here to this day. This story has about 3 parts in it, all related to each other over time that led me to think that my house is haunted. I live on the East Coast, in the middle of nowhere, with about 13 acres of woods that we own, and about another 27 more acres that surround us all around our property, with a few people who live close by. As a kid, I liked spells and magic, so I would play with that type of thing. With the background out of the way, the first part of this story is from when I was about 5 or so. I still remember it so well it scares me, even today. On the night I speak of, I had gotten in trouble with my parents for sassing off to them, and was sent to my room. It was dark out when I was tossing a clear, sparkly plastic Cinderella shoe around the room. I accidentally tossed it onto the floor, and it flopped to the floor of my closet. I got up and out of bed, and I picked up the shoe. When I stood back up, my eyes locked with a young woman with shoulder-length fawn-colored hair and green eyes. As for what she wore, I forgot, but I do know that she was pale and had burn marks on her left arm and right leg. She looked at me, and I stared at her. Then she walked into one wall toward the hallway before she then turned back around and walked back into my closet through the other side of the wall. After this happened, I saw her every night for many weeks and I called her my ghost friend, or Meg, as I got older. After about 2 years of telling people about her, no one would listen and people began telling me I was insane. Because of this, I stopped talking about it and kind of forgot about her in my stories. Well, I did not forget exactly. I just stopped thinking about it. The second part was from about a year ago. One night, our neighbors, the closest people to us are about 1/4 of a mile from us, we were having a big party that night. The noise was so loud that even from as far away as we were, we could still hear them. I am a heavy sleeper, but it was just loud enough to keep me from sleeping. At about 11 p.m., they had shut off the music, playing something other than loud rap music, and began playing something a little softer, at which point I ended up falling asleep at some point. Then, at about 2 a.m., the music once again got so loud as it played one last song that sounded like thunder right over us. Soon it once again got silent, and I laid there what felt like hours trying to sleep. I couldn't fall asleep. I wondered if maybe I had to pee, which is usually why I can't sleep sometimes. I pushed my pelvis with my finger to see if I needed to pee, and I found that I did. So I got up and walked to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom in the dark since I knew my house so well from living in it for 5 years. I was leaving the bathroom when I heard a low, inhuman growl that was almost like it was whispered in the wind even though it was indoors. I froze in fear and looked around the living room before me. My eyes then landed on a black aura in the far corner. where a feeling of hate and anger filled my head. I can feel auras and see spirits, so I was used to this. But when the thing's hate filled the room, I got a little scared. The atmosphere thickened like glue, and the weight pushed down on every inch of my soul and being. It got closer as the black aura grew. The sound of growling and shaggy breathing made me run into my room as fast as I could, even though it was only like 2 or 3 meters away from me. I slammed my bedroom door, jumped into bed, and did my best to create positive energy to keep the evil out. The third part of my story was just about 4 days ago. I shower usually every other day, and so one night I brought my Echo into my bathroom and put my Pandora station before singing to songs while in the shower. I had just put the shampoo into my hair when I heard a whistle. It was foggy, but very clear. I stopped and peeled back the curtains while yelling to my mom, asking her if she was trying to prank me. With no answer, I asked my brother the same thing, and again, no answer. I asked if anyone was there, and still, I got no answer. So I got back into the water and finished my shower quickly. I grabbed my Echo and ran into the kitchen to ask my mother about the whistling. My mother said she did not even go in there because she was making some banana bread for us all to eat, and also that my brother was asleep upstairs. Then I sat down on the corner of the counter and told my mom about what had happened. My mom found it odd that my usually 30-minute showers were cut down less to 7. My dad, who was traveling for work purposes up for New York somewhere, called and was telling us his brother, who was with him, was just telling him about an experience with a ghost on our house a few years ago. Basically, my Uncle Mike had gone to our house while we were in New Orleans and took his friend with him as they were coming down to see my grandmother and Uncle Mike's mother. It was late that night when Mike's friend had got up to go to the bathroom. Then, as he entered the back room, he heard a woman's voice behind him that said, "When are you going to leave?" He froze, turned around, and woke Mike up and told him he could not stay, so he left the house and did not come back inside, and still won't to this very day. This is not my story but my dad's. My dad worked as a police officer from 1987 to 1995 and told me some crazy stories. This one beats them all though. The following is told from his perspective. It was the summer of July 1993 and I was doing my regular patrol. The whole night seemed really boring. Nothing over the radio, no speeders, no EMS calls. In the police world, you never get comfortable on a routine patrol, they say. I parked and started to set up a speed trap. I parked for maybe 2 hours with nothing in sight. The location I usually patrolled has always freaked me out, honestly. Despite the fact that I'm not a believer in the whole ghost thing, there really is a lot of creepy things that happen here. It's about 2 a.m. when I noticed an old 1950 Chevy Impala passing by me, going at a speed limit of just 10 miles per hour. The speed limit for the road was 30, so this was very suspicious to me. I began to follow the car, and despite the low speed, I noticed nothing out of the norm. I radioed into control for the regs of the plate. It came back unknown, which isn't too odd since some people have classics they never re-register. I turned on my blues to make a traffic stop on the vehicle. I then shined my spotlight into the car and noticed 2 occupants, who appeared to be older. One was an elderly man and the other an elderly woman. I notified patrol and asked them to run their license and their plates. I sat in my patrol for several minutes waiting for dispatch to get back to me with any information. After about 3 minutes, dispatch returned with still unknown. I looked down for no more than 5 seconds to grab a notebook and look back, and the car was gone. Mind you, I had my windows open and the car was sort of loud given the year of the vehicle. But the sound was gone. It was almost as if it was never there. For the life of me, I cannot explain that. I remember feeling static in the air. The hairs on my arms stood up. There is no way a vehicle could just have taken off within that time. To this day, I cannot explain it for the life of me. I know a lot of people would say something like that it sped off, but my head was down for no more than 5 seconds to grab my notebook on my seat. I hate patrolling that road till this very day. When I was little, my cousin and I were at my mother's house. You see, my parents are divorced and my cousin comes over sometimes. This happened a while ago when I was around 5 or so, whereas right now I'm around 10 to 15. So, I have an older sister who's 11 years older than I am, and she loved partying at the time of her age. She was invited to some party on this particular night, so my mom decided why the heck not let the kids go for a little ride. After all, they can't be there by themselves alone, so she brought us with them. My mom drove us near these woods, so I and my cousin joked around, not thinking much of it. Also, I should point out it's around 10 or 12 at night. After my sister was dropped off and my cousin started looking out the windows pointing out what we saw, it was all fun and games until my cousin pointed out that he saw some man. I gave him a confused look as he tried showing me, but we had already passed. Once we got home, I asked my cousin what he looked like. All my cousin told me was, he was just a tall man in the woods. I should let you know my cousin is just 4 years older than I, and we have a very strong bond together. He's like a second brother to me. Anyways, after all that happened, and I started to get these strange feelings as if I was being watched. Sometimes I would hear voices whispering and the sound of knocking. I always thought they were just my sister's friends since they usually slept over. Now that I'm the age I am now, I asked my cousin about the tall man, and he told me he was around 8 to 10 feet tall, and he was just behind a tree watching the car. My cousin said he couldn't really tell the facial features, but he definitely saw white. He said the man was in some sort of tuxedo or black shirt. He couldn't really tell. I still hear the whispers and voices. The only thing I learned was the voices were not my sister's friends. My sister now lives with a son of her own, and I still hear these things. It's gotten worse since. I hear tapping on my windows, and a tall figure outside sometimes. My iPad shuts off whenever I hear the voices and my clock starts to give off these static noises. It's always 11:18 p.m. when it happens. Every time I hear it, I see the figure now. I've learned to live with the fact that my parents don't believe me. I just turned 16. This was my sophomore summer break. I and my buddy John always loved to go riding. Sometimes we'd ride from 7 in the morning till 4 the next morning. Well, I'll just tell you after this night we never stayed out again. It was a hot July night about 11 or so, and we were having a good old time on the strip. We see 2 sets of headlights down the main road, but we didn't pay much attention to it at first. But they started moving in the same direction we were, and we weren't even on the road. We were in a huge field. We kind of felt uneasy when they got less than 20 yards or so from us. We could make out the vehicles by now, and realized it was 2 razors flooring it at us. My buddy looked scared to death and I was too, so we jumped on our 4-wheelers and got the hell out of there. We took a turn down into a creek, but what we thought was only 2 vehicles became more. We reached the bottom, we saw another side by side flip its lights on and come straight for us. At this point, we were like hell no and shot up their stair steps. If you don't know what these are, they are hills on a strip that looks like stairs that are cut into them. We soon pulled into a group of hollow mallow bushes and shut off our 4-wheelers. We listened closely and heard 3 or 4 4-wheelers searching for us. I really didn't know what to do, and I had no idea why these guys were following us, because I had permission from all the owners to ride up here. Eventually, we decided it had to be drunks. They all met up at the bottom of the hill and shut their side-by-sides off if the lights were still shining right at us, like they knew where we were. One guy got out and started walking towards us when he stopped at the base of the hill and yelled,
"Hey, you two!"
We were like, oh shit, and didn't answer back. The guy then said we can wait all night when my friend John got the courage to say, what the hell do you want? That's when the guy said we want you to come with us. We love us some young blood, and you both will die tonight and be eaten. I thought it was some dumbasses playing a joke, but then there were 5 more guys who came out and started up the hill. At this point, we run to our 4-wheelers and get the hell out of there. The only way out was to drive right by them. We hauled asses out of there before we finally got to the main road. We could see their headlights coming down the hill when we floored it back to my house, which was a good 5 miles away. We made it home safely and put the 4-wheelers away. We didn't crash till 4 that morning. I've since been back to that site of this occurrence many times. I've never run into whoever was chasing us that night again though. I should start by saying I've never had anything really paranormal happen to me. Besides the one time when I lived in an old house in upstate New York, where my mom and I heard footsteps going up and down the basement stairs. We called the cops, but no one was there in the basement. That's where my experiences end. That was until today. I live in Brooklyn. My car needed an inspection, so I went to a shop in Red Hook. By the way, best mechanic I've ever been to, but that's besides the point. I walk up the street to a bench to wait out my car inspection when I decide to call my aunt, which I do frequently. I notice that Greenwood Cemetery is right up the street. Greenwood is a huge cemetery and also home to the location of the Battle of Brooklyn, a Revolutionary War battle. It was the number 2 most visited nature site in the 1800s and the turn of the century, second only to Niagara Falls. I've always wanted to go there, as it's beautiful and used as a public park. The guy calls me back about the car, and I put my aunt on hold, and I am told my car will be ready in 2 hours. Cemetery, here I come. I walked around speaking to my aunt on the phone for about an hour, reading old graves aloud to her and just marveling at how beautiful the cemetery actually is. No wonder, I say to her, that people pay $17,000 to be buried here. As the end of my 2 hours winds down, I decide to get up from the bench I was sitting on top of. The best thing is I can see exactly how to get out of here, I say to my aunt as I make my way down the hill. I start complaining about how steep the hills are. She makes a joke about me not getting locked in and making sure the gates are still open, because this actually happened to someone she knew in the same cemetery. Suddenly, out of literally nowhere, there's a shushing sound like someone is telling us to be quiet. Immediately after, hundreds of distorted voices, all unintelligible, begin speaking at the same time. To say I was shocked and confused is an understatement. Neither of us could hear each other anymore, just the distorted voices uninterrupted, occasionally by a rather crisp and clear shh, like someone was telling us to be quiet. I listened for a good long time, thinking maybe it's a cell interference or something. There were so many voices at the same time, and they were so distorted, so unearthly sounding. I'm getting chills thinking about it. I would confidently say this was definitely not some kind of cell phone interference. I listened for at least 2 minutes trying to understand at least one voice to no avail. Let me say, I'm a pretty big skeptic, but this was something I can't explain, something that rattled me pretty badly. Where to start? I've had a few paranormal experiences. Allow me to build up my story by telling you a couple of them I've experienced. The first time I can remember, I was living at my dad's at the time, and I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard a whisper in my ear saying, "Aaron." This happened twice, which freaked me out so much I was too scared to move. I closed my eyes, and that was what reassured me that there was an unwanted presence in my room. The Hoover turning itself on with the plug in the socket, but was switched off. My uncle thought I was crazy till he came and saw for himself. The second time I was at my home where I live now, playing on my Xbox, when all of a sudden a picture came flying off the fireplace taking a pot ornament with it. My girlfriend still thinks I got mad and broke it, but I swear there wasn't even a window open. I just tried to ignore it and carry on playing my game. Now, here's where it gets seriously weird. It was a calm night when me and my 3 mates were up to no good in a local town not too far from my hometown of Newark. We were exploring this old abandoned school, which had been arson attacked, so we figured it had a lot of fire damage. We decided to jump the fence and to explore this place, and soon we entered through an old arc window with no glass in it. We thought the best place to enter was here. Anyway, we entered and looked around the whole place, positive that we were the only people there. We looked around and found some old Victorian copper piping, which at the time was worth a small fortune. Thus, we decided to get some tools in a bag and began to take the copper piping. I know I'm ashamed of myself now, but at the time I was a young teenager and broke. We must have been there for quite a while when one of my friends said to go get the copper cutters from the boys who were in the room next to us. I went to go get them, but it was pitch black in there until we were in the hallway and the streetlights just broke the darkness enough to see where we were. I go into the next room and ask where the cutters are. The boys reply, "What you on about?" "They're on the trolley in the hallways in the bag." I said okay, and then I went to go get them. After a bit of searching, I realized I could not find the bag anywhere, so we all searched for the bag. My mate said I definitely left this on the trolley, so we stood there scratching our heads thinking the only possibility could be someone else was here. We searched the whole place and never found anyone. I shit you not though, what happened next was the craziest thing I've ever experienced. We could hear whispers like loads of people whispering. The whispers were coming towards us, and as they did, we stood there in shock. Fear overcame us as the whispering got closer and louder. Soon it passed over our heads and away from us, like down the end of the hallway. We all turned white as a ghost. We were all shocked and stood there looking at each other like, what the hell? We got the hell out of there soon after. We didn't sleep again until the next morning. We were simply grateful to have gotten the heck out of there. When I was little, my dad used to work the night shift, leaving both my mom and I home alone most nights. I am an only child, so her and I would stay up together at night to pass the time. Anyway, one night while he was at work, my mom and I sat together on the couch watching TV. Our house is 2 stories, but since it was just the 2 of us home, we were both downstairs. We had all the lights off upstairs. While watching our show, we noticed the volume on the TV started to cut out. Thinking it was just something to do with the show, we didn't really react to it. After just a couple seconds of that, the picture started to get fuzzy. You know, like those little black and white dots you see when your cable goes out. So the picture just starts cutting in and out like this while the volume is completely mute now. Thinking definitely had to be the show, we looked to the remote to change it when the light on the table next to us begins to flicker, like the power was going on and off. Only, it was just the lamp and not the lights in the kitchen. Slowly dimming itself and then getting brighter over and over again. We looked at each other really confused when we noticed a light in the hall upstairs. It was as if someone turned on our hall light, but that was impossible. I saw it like it was in slow motion. This giant ball of light literally came halfway down our staircase before completely disappearing. The second it disappeared, the TV came back to normal. Its volume was working again and the light on the table next to us stopped flickering. My mom and I looked at each other in utter disbelief and shock. Mind you, this all happened within the span of 10 to 15 seconds. In that moment though, time felt like it had slowed to a crawl. To this day, I still cannot explain what happened, and I tend not to tell people out of fear of sounding like a crazy person. However, I can honestly say that this was the single most perplexing and unexplainable experience I have ever witnessed in my life. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these creepy and unexplainable stories, be sure to hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. Hit the subscribe button if you're new and turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day on everything natural and supernatural. Much thanks to my friend Mr. X Dreams for helping reading the second story on this video. If you enjoyed his voice, please check out his channel and subscribe. You can find the link in the description and the pinned comment down below. If you guys have a story you'd like to share in a future video, whether it be some unexplainable thing with the paranormal or something different, be sure to send it in to swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. If you guys would like to talk to me outside of YouTube and get to know me better personally, the best way to do that is on Twitter and Instagram. Follow me on Twitter at iSwampDweller and follow me on Instagram at SwampDwellerOfficial. I'll see you guys soon with a new video.